Good evening, Western Standard viewers, and welcome to Hannaford, a weekly politics show of the Western Standard. It is Thursday, May the 22nd. Last month, Mark Carney was elected Prime Minister by Canadians who thought he was the best man to deal with U.S. President Trump. Since then, there was one meeting between the two, and it seemed civil enough, but a lot of us watching thought that if anybody got dealt with, it probably wasn't Trump. To me, the questions are, what does dealing with Trump mean? What does he want? Stripped of all the bluster, is there something to make sense of? With me today is author and political economist Brian Lee Crowley. Brian is founder of Ottawa's leading think tank, the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, and also of the Washington-based Center for North American Prosperity and Security. Good to have you back, Brian.
It's always great to be on the show, Nigel.
Thank you, Brian. Brian, does what Trump is doing make any sense for America, if not for the rest of the world?
Yes, I think it's terribly important, Nigel, that we get rid of this idea, which I hear from so many people, that Trump is kind of a madman. You know, that there's no rhyme or reason to what he does. He gets up in the morning and he does one thing, and the next day he contradicts himself. I have to say that whether you like what Donald Trump is doing or not is kind of irrelevant. But to suggest that you can't understand what he's doing, I think is completely wrong. I think there's a number of threads that, if you weave them together, kind of add up to what you might call the Trump Doctrine. If you like, I'll kind of walk you through what I think those main threads are.
I think we'd love that. Go ahead, Brian.
Terrific. Well, so I think number one, and this looms terribly large in Trump's imagination. He believes that America is the greatest country in the world. The whole "Make America Great Again" theme is actually quite central to his thinking, in the sense that he believes that America must be the top nation in the world. That's capital T, capital N, top nation. And everything that he does is designed to return America to that leadership position in the world, which he believes has been lost as a result of years of inadequate leadership in Washington. So that's number one. Number two, going with this idea that America must be top nation, you have to ask yourself, well, who's the greatest threat to America being the top nation? That's China, without any doubt. And Trump sees China as the great geostrategic competitor to the United States. And so he's not only trying to build up America into a predominant leadership position in the world, but he's also trying to respond to China's drive to become top nation. And so many of the things that I think go into the Trump Doctrine include doing all the things that make sure that America is never reliant on anybody else, and especially not on China, for any strategic minerals or materials. Think about aluminum, think about steel, think about microchips, etc. He wants to end any dependence on China, and he's now using the trade negotiations that he's undertaking with other countries to press them to reduce their dependence on trade with China. If you look, for example, at the agreement that he struck with the UK, while we don't have many of the details, we do know that inserted in there is the ability of America to press Britain to make sure that its trade relationships are not imbalanced in favor of other countries. And clearly, China is the target here. So that's number two. Number three, I would say, is Trump feels that as a result of America's loss of leadership position in the world, as a result of its loss of predominance in the trade field, where he feels that America has become far too dependent on other countries for many strategic products. As a result of that, the offshoring of many jobs, the loss of manufacturing, and so on, he believes that an important part of the American population has been left behind by this failure of American leadership. And he's thinking particularly of the people who were kind of immortalized in J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy. We're talking about the heartland of the United States, the so-called Rust Belt states, the American South, et cetera, all through Appalachia. These are people who have lost economic hope in many cases, whose towns and cities have been devastated by job losses. They've fallen victim to the fentanyl crisis. Is another reason why fentanyl looms so large in Donald Trump's imagination. And he sees himself as the tribune of these people in the American political system. And so he's determined to do everything he can to restore hope to these communities. And so everything that's done to, kind of push back against imports, it's not just a trade balance thing. I believe that Trump is trying his darndest to create the conditions in which investment comes back to the United States in the form of jobs that will be available to the kind of people who've been left behind by the changes of the last few decades. And the final thing I'll say, because there are many other things we could weave into this, we talked about how Make America Great Again is kind of a slogan, but it's also indicative of an idea that is central to Trump's political thinking. The other slogan, which I think is profoundly important in understanding Trump, is drill, baby, drill. You see, people think that that's just a kind of a finger in the eye to the green movement, the people who are against fossil fuels and so on, and it is certainly that. But much more importantly, I think a large part of the economic strategy that Trump has been pursuing to reduce dependence on China, to bring jobs back to the United States, is premised on the idea that cheap energy will be a major driver of an industrial renaissance in the United States. And he looks at the fact that the fracking revolution has turned America from a net importer of oil. In fact, until quite recently, they had a law that forbade the exporting of oil from the United States because they were so frightened of the idea that they might fall victim to another oil embargo and so on. And now they're the world's largest, not only the world's largest producer of oil, they're also the world's largest exporter of oil. And this is not only something that Trump thinks is worthwhile in its own right, but it's a key driver of that economic renaissance, which he is pursuing on behalf of those people who were left behind by the political leadership of the last few decades. And I think that's the Trump Doctrine.
The Trump Doctrine. So there is actually an internal consistency to it that if you are an American, it makes sense. Now, of course, we are sitting here on, frankly, what has increasingly become a very clear sideline, anxious, as we should be, about the fate of some very important industries in Eastern Canada. You have referred in other interviews in this series to the transactional nature of politics in Washington. In other words, never mind what you've just done for me, what are you going to do for me next? Now, given that Trump's actions have a purpose and an internal consistency that makes sense if you are an American, and we are Canadians trying to keep our economy together, what is there that we can do for America that is actually going to make America continue to work for us? What's the transaction?
Well, I actually think we have a lot to work with, Nigel. Now, I think if you were the leader of Canada, what you would want to do is would want to ask yourself the question, okay, can I understand what Trump is doing? I think the answer is yes. If you understand what Trump is doing, then the question becomes, so how could we convince Trump that Canada could contribute to his objectives for the United States in a way that doesn't harm and indeed promotes Canada's interests? I think that's got to be the key questions that we ask ourselves.
Absolutely.
And it seems to me that if you think back to what I've said about the Trump Doctrine, what Trump's trying to achieve, there are a number of things that sort of leap out at me as things that we could do that not only would be attractive to Trump, but are actually in Canada's interest. Let's think about, for example, one of the things I didn't mention, but it's completely logical in the Trump thinking as I outlined it. His attempt to reduce illegal immigration and to close the borders essentially to unauthorized movements of people and goods, especially drugs, fentanyl, so on. There's no doubt that America is increasingly of the view that the Canadian border is a point of vulnerability. And I think that they are not wrong about that. I think they sometimes exaggerate it, fair enough. But you see, I think that if Canada came to the United States and said, look, we recognize that there is some fentanyl trade that takes place, smuggling that takes place across the border. We recognize that organized crime is laundering a lot of money from the fentanyl trade carried out in the United States, laundering that money in Canada. So we have an organized crime problem. We have a border security problem. We can help you fix those things. So and those things are in Canada's interest. We don't want to be a home for organized crime internationally. We don't want to be a place that people come to because they think they can sneak across the border in one form or another and do things that endanger Americans. That's the fast road to seeing our relationship with the United States take a complete nosedive. So there's two things. Number three, Donald Trump, again, as part of the logic of the Trump Doctrine, feels that a lot of the rest of the world has been taking advantage of America. And we're thinking particularly here of the NATO allies, all of whom have promised in return for NATO's guarantee of their defense in the case of invasion by foreign powers. They're supposed to spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense. Canada is one of the worst laggards in NATO. Trump is looking for evidence that NATO is taking much more seriously the promises they've made in return for America's contribution to their security guarantee. And again, I think the decline of Canadian armed forces is a terrible story for Canada. We have lost our ability to project Canadian power abroad in areas that we think are in our interests. And so to go to the United States and say, look, we realize we become what you accuse us of being, which is a free rider on America's defense effort, and we're going to fix that. All of these things, and there are many more I could mention, happen to be in Canada's interests and happen to be things that would fit nicely with Trump's worldview. So I think there's a lot to work with here. I note, by the way, that Mark Carney, our new prime minister, has been saying, look, we should participate in America's new, strategic defense initiative, the so-called Golden Dome. And I think that is exactly taken from the playbook that I've just laid out.
Okay, because otherwise, Brian, we could say that we're really back where we were shortly after President Trump was elected in November of last year, in which he said, we got a problem with fentanyl coming in, and you guys need to pay more attention to defense. We've had 6 months to make some kind of meaningful movement on that. Other than saying, yes, we could be a partner in the Golden Dome, I'm not sure whether there's really been anything effective done. Money has been committed. I mean, that's what Ottawa does best. But in terms of actual people patrolling the border, either physically or through some kind of remote sensing, are you aware that we have really done anything on this in 6 months?
Well, I certainly agree that there has been a vacuum of leadership. As you know, Parliament hasn't sat for the last 6 months. We went through a long period of, the long goodbye of Justin Trudeau. We didn't know, essentially who was going to be prime minister. I mean, our politics has been in a terrible mess, Nigel, and I think it has not served Canada well. We have done some things, we made some of the right noises, but I think America is going to want to see real delivery here. And I've been making the case that what Canada needs to do is not to focus on the trade issue alone, which seems to be the thing that preoccupies so many people, and I quite understand why. But we have so many things that we can contribute to what Donald Trump's trying to do in the United States that are in our interest, that I think we need to sit down with the American administration and say, look, let's negotiate a grand bargain. Let's not just talk about trade. Let's not just talk about the border or defense, whatever, in separate conversations. Let's bring it all together and let's demonstrate to America that we can do things that are in their interests while also defending and promoting Canada's interests. And I think by putting these things together in this so-called grand bargain, I think it allows us to make trade-offs. It allows us to get things that we want because America can see that in return we're giving them concrete things. Your criticism, we've been aware of this for months, and Canada hasn't done very much, I think is fair. To be fair as well to the government of Canada, there's a new prime minister. They've just emerged from election. They're in a minority situation. I think now is the time when the clock really starts ticking on America's judgment of whether Canada is going to be a friend or someone just to manage their decline. And I think we need to come forward with a bold strategy. It always falls to Canada to come forward with bold ideas for managing the Canada-US relationship, because frankly, Canada just doesn't loom that large in the American imagination, whereas America looms very large in the Canadian imagination. That's why free trade, for example, was a Canadian idea that we convinced America to pursue. I think it's now the time for Canada to put on that thinking cap, to think those big thoughts about the Canada-US relationship and not be put off by Donald Trump's, annoying personality traits. That we have to think much bigger than that. And if we can show Donald Trump that we can contribute to those things that I laid out at the beginning, which he's trying to achieve for America, I think there's a lot of scope for us to do something quite good for Canada.
So, two questions, Brian, as we come close to time. One is, do you think that Mr. Carney is going to regret saying quite as quickly as he did that it's all over, the special relationship is dead, two solitudes? Well, let's start with that one. What is this helpful? I guess the second question is can the auto industry in Ontario be saved? But let's deal with, is the special relationship over?
No, absolutely not. The fact of the matter is that international trade is here to stay. America, 25% of the American economy depends on international trade. We're their largest, or, depending on what you're measuring, either the first or the second largest trade partner with the United States. We do lots of things that they need, whatever Donald Trump says about not needing anything from Canada. So the special relationship is not over. It is a fact of geography and a fact of history that a 4-year presidency can do little to affect. It can be damaged, but it will not be thrown out with the trash. Now, you asked me about Mark Carney's comments during the election campaign. I have to say that it would be important to contrast what he said during the election campaign to Canadians with what he said in the White House to Donald Trump, because those are different audiences. I think he clearly saw that that Canadians were deeply anxious about the relationship with the United States and what they saw Donald Trump doing. And he played on that fear very successfully. He's a successful politician now. He, I think, won the election by suggesting to Canadians that, yes, elbows up, let's get in there, retaliate on tariffs, do all these things, which I think a lot of Canadians found emotionally satisfying, but in terms of Canada's long-term interests is completely counterproductive. When he went to Washington, he did not say, Mr. Trump, Canada's done with you and we have no time for you and we're going to, stick all kinds of tariffs on you. No, he said, Mr. Trump, I'm so glad to, finally have a chance to sit down with you. You are a transformational president. I mean, he did everything he could to ingratiate himself with Donald Trump. This is not the behavior of someone who thinks that their special relationship with the United States is over. This is the behavior of someone who is saying, okay, now that I'm in power and I have the ability to actually bring things to the table, make a deal with Donald Trump, tell him that I'm going to participate in the Golden Dome, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is what he's going to do. And don't forget, during the election campaign, that while he said there'll be dollar for dollar retaliation against American tariffs, in fact, during the election campaign, he was taking tariffs off, which is something that only emerged later. So I think he's always had two games in mind here. One's the domestic Canadian political game, and one's managing the relationship with the United States. And I think the signals are that the last thing that Mark Carney wants is to see the end of the special relationship between Canada and the United States.
And what does that mean for the auto workers in Ontario?
Well, I think we mustn't single out specific industries or sectors or problems in the relationship. I'm not minimizing the fear that the auto industry faces in the United in Southern Ontario. But what I'm saying is the way to deal with that is as part of this larger array of issues. There's so much momentum behind the binational sharing of the Canada-U.S. auto relationship that auto manufacturers in the United States have told the White House, look, if you try and stop us importing parts and manufacturing contributions from Canada to the United States, our production lines will come to a halt. And this is why every time Donald Trump makes a threat, it's quickly followed by but nothing will happen for 90 days while we work things out. He keeps pushing it off and pushing it off and pushing it off. I think the thing to do is not to panic, to think about how to manage the whole relationship and to make sure that the things that we really need to see in a larger relationship with the United States, like the continued participation of Canada in the auto industry, like the continued participation of Canada in the energy industry, et cetera, that all of these things are protected and promoted in a larger agreement with the United States.
So don't panic, and it makes sense. And when it makes sense, things can be worked out by reasonable people. Brian, we are out of time. Thank you very much for once more sharing your insights on Canadian-American relationships. It's a pleasure as always.
Lovely to talk to you, Nigel.
For the Western Standard, I'm Nigel Hannaford.